I'm just saying I'm not finished yet. Search for it, swing for it, discover the me that lives in yes. Stand for it, stretch for it. It's my time, imagine my best. Run for it, reach for it, uncover the me that lives in yes. I know, yes I know, there'll be miracles wherever I go. It's not work, it's play. I can make magic today.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Senior Nation. I'm your host, Phyllis Ayman, and you are listening to the Source TV Radio Network, WTSN, Washington, D.C. We are indeed a senior nation with 100 plus million adults over the age of 50. And we are here to bring you up-to-date information about successful aging, healthful longevity, and becoming what I call a well-ager. To dignity, respect, quality of life, and quality of care for our parents, our grandparents, and loved ones. We at Senior Nation will be your trusted voice for informed choices, meaningful conversations, and a vibrant life at every age. Though the Source TV Radio Network is known for its dedication to bringing the highest level of jazz content to the viewing and listening audience, the owners of the network are also dedicated to bringing this important content to this fast-growing demographic. And I'm always so grateful for the opportunity. And now for tonight's guest. Lori La Bey is a passionate and inspiring keynote speaker and the founder of Alzheimer's Speaks, a Minnesota-based advocacy group and media outlet making an international impact by providing education and support for families and people living with Alzheimer's disease and other dementias. She became a champion for people living with dementia after her mother was diagnosed and lived with the disease for 30 years. In 2011, Alzheimer's Speaks Radio launched as the first program dedicated to dementia in the world and is still named the #1 Alzheimer's podcast. It has been applauded by AARP, Oprah Winfrey, and Maria Shriver. In 2020, a 37-year dream came true when Lori partnered with Dave Wiederrich, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, to launch Dementia Map Global Resource Directory, of which Lori is now the sole owner. And Lori launched what is believed to be the first memory cafe in the United States in Roseville, Minnesota, and is the founding member of Roseville's Alzheimer's and Dementia Community Action Team. So I'm so thrilled that Lori had the time to share her experiences and her insights with me tonight on Senior Nation.
Hi, Phyllis. I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, hi, Lori. It's great to see you again. We've done this a few times through the years, so it's nice to be able to do it again. And, it's such an important topic. And not only that, the last few weeks I've had, last week I had Dan Cohen with Right to Music, and the week before Jack York, and, that talked about I Am Too Well, and, how that developed for people living with dementia based on his own experience with his mom. So do you want to talk about your journey that started with your mom? Because I'm sure there are many listeners and viewers who are experiencing this. If they haven't experienced it in the past, they're experiencing it right now.
Oh, sure. With my mom, like many people, we had no idea what was going on. There was just a little decline here, a little change of behavior there. And, no one talked to us about aging. And so we kind of thought it was normal aging until one day it wasn't. And then we kind of fell into a crisis and went to the doctor. And the doctor was, even though my mom prior to this had been talking to him about things are off, I'm not remembering things, I'm getting confused, I'm misplacing things. But things I've always done are becoming more difficult. He just kept throwing it off to menopause for like 10 years.
Wow.
10 years. But you got to remember, I'll give them a little cush. My mom's been gone since 2014, and throw that back another 30 years. That was a long time ago. The sad part is we are still hearing that same story from many families.
Correct.
And people are misdiagnosed. It's depression. It's midlife crisis. You're too young. It can't be this. It can't be that.
It's stress.
Yeah, it's stress, especially nowadays. So it's really important to follow your gut, push your doctors, and get a second opinion if you need to, because getting a diagnosis early can help in terms of people understanding what's going on and possibly what to anticipate coming down the road, though there's still a lot of confusion on that. We had talked about that before we got on air.
Right.
People will receive a diagnosis and you think, oh, okay, I have Alzheimer's disease. I don't like it. I'm depressed. I'm frustrated. Then you kind of push through it. You accept it. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh no, you have MCI, mild cognitive impairment. And they go, there's nothing mild about this at all.
Right.
What do you mean? I have the same symptoms. And now you're like downgrading me to the public,
Right.
People would get really frustrated. Or all of a sudden it switches to Lewy body, which has a whole different set of symptoms. So, what we're seeing now when people go in is they're not getting a specified diagnosis. It's similar to or falls in the category of, so that they have more flex, because this is really a baby disease, and kind of baby research has been done so far. It's only been around really 100 years. And so we had a long ways to go. Kind of like, I don't know if you remember, I'm old enough to remember when cancer, people couldn't even say the word. It was the C word.
It was the C
word. It was just the C word. No one could say the whole word, And so we're kind of in that state in terms of, do you give a formal name to it? Because is it going to create fear in my family and friends? And are they going to push away from me? Nobody wants that.
Correct. So I was, it's funny that you just said that, because we talked about this a little bit beforehand, because that's often what happens when people receive this diagnosis. They think, oh my God, my life is over. I mean, people have been told that, you have 3 to 6 years to live. That's one side of the equation, the spectrum, as opposed to it's Alzheimer's like, maybe it gives people a little more of a comfort level. I think that, the best way for a person, to be diagnosed, and you're probably the best person to speak about this, is you really need a thorough neurologic to get a thorough diagnosis. I mean, to get a true diagnosis, because a lot of doctors, they just either are not willing to, or they don't, or they're not sure,
Yeah. And even that, the tools that they use are changing. Like right now, I'm kind of pushing back, and I know a lot of people aren't, but I personally am, in terms of everybody should get a blood test and everybody should know, could they get it? Well, you know what? If we all got a blood test to see if we had a cancer gene, chances are we all have a cancer gene, probably more than one. Is it going to, really formulate and take over? We don't know that. Correct. And so it makes me nervous that there's a lot of this push to say you could have something. We could all have a lot of things, but how's that going to affect our insurance? How's that going to affect our mental health if there's not support for that? How's it going to affect our relationships? Especially when we still are, in my opinion, very much lacking in support of this disease.
I agree. So Tori says, I can't get a clear understanding about how much of Alzheimer's is genetic, or is it random?
It's a very, I'm not a doctor. I have no medical degree, and I'm not one that goes down and constantly is reading the journals. So I'll tell you this, it's a very small percentage is what they're telling us, but I'll also tell you they don't know.
Correct.
And the reason I say that is because I do a lot of support groups that will say they've been told it's not genetic, and yet they can list 7 people in their family bloodline who have had dementia. So there's just so much that we don't know, with this disease. And I think a lot of it has to do with our mindset, and, our genetics is part of it. But I also believe it's how much purpose do we have in life? And they're finally starting to study social impact on this disease. And I just was reading one the other day that said, oh, it looks like, people who feel purposeful are less likely. Well, duh. People who feel purposeful are less likely to be depressed. They're less likely to have illnesses. It's like, this is not rocket science. And so sometimes, and again, I'm a frustrated daughter, so take me for what I'm worth here. But I think sometimes common sense is kicked to the side. And I think that's a real mistake.
But I not to interrupt you, but it's like you said, no duh. I mean, what did we find out during COVID? That loneliness, isolation contributes to cognitive decline. I mean, that's no different than that. That's why, engagement, feeling purposeful, feeling connected, why all of this is so important, because otherwise, you're just kind of languishing, and then there's overall deterioration, even physically, not only mentally, in every which way.
Oh, exactly. And, Tori, for, trying to have a clear understanding, it's really hard because a lot of the science out there fights one another. They're still chasing plaques and tangles, which has been misproven, through the nun studies years and years ago. So, I think dementia as a whole, and maybe I should give this definition too, because there's probably listeners that don't know the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's. Dementia is just a category. Like cancer is a category. Right. It's not a disease, it's a category. And then under cancer, you could have lung cancer, breast cancer, cervical cancer, whatever. Dementia is kind of the same thing. There's Alzheimer's, which is the most pronounced. Right. And it was the one that was pushed the most. And then there's Lewy body, where people can have like these horrible, horrible nightmares where they don't even sleep with their spouse anymore because they get in combat and they're afraid they're literally going to kill or hurt their spouse or their partner. And they can have fluctuations in heart rate and body temperature and all different types of things that no one ever talks about. And then we have frontal temporal lobe, where personalities can change. So someone who is sweet and kind is now like almost like a sex addict, or they're swearing like a sailor, or vice versa. So there's lots of vascular from people who are smokers many times. So there's lots of different kinds, and you can have mixed dementia, which means more than one. And that is something the doctors are not preparing people for. And I really wish that they would, but in a way that doesn't make somebody just want to collapse and give up. Because I know so many people who have lived, and I'm sure you do too, Phyllis, who have lived with dementia a long time. Like, when I was younger, people would say, there's no way your mom's had dementia for 30 years. Absolutely. You're crazy. You're crazy. You're crazy. And yet when we did her autopsy and the neurologist looked at it, he actually gasped because he had never seen a brain that atrophied. And he's like, Lori, you were right. She did have this whole time. And she not only had Alzheimer's, but Parkinson's and Lewy body. So, people can live a long life and it can still be a good life. It's going to be a different life. Correct.
I just want to interject. And then there's also, which we didn't mention, alcohol-induced dementia.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a whole other thing. But, we talked about this earlier also, that people who are diagnosed with Parkinson's often develop dementia. It doesn't have to be, but it can happen. And then people with dementia, as you say, with your mom, then can develop Parkinson's. And I don't think people fully understand that's possible.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like, you could have heart disease, and because of your heart disease, now you have kidney issues because of
Right,
the
right,
medications you're taking. I mean, those types of things happen. Disease isn't siloed. We'd like it to be okay, you can give me one, but no more.
right,
That's just
right,
not how life works,
right. Right. One from column A and two from column B or whatever. I don't know if anybody listening or viewing remembers that comes from certain kind of restaurants from years ago. But yeah, I think it's the fact that your mom did live that long with it is quite incredible. But also the care you took of her and the involvement you had with her care, I'm sure had a lot to do with, her longevity with the disease. What would you say?
I would agree, but the piece that most people miss is the care she gave to me during those years.
I know I've
Because
heard you
we
say that
we
many times. Yeah.
because we are told so often, well, they don't know you, so you don't really have to go see them, because our friends are so uncomfortable with how do we support them. Sometimes it's easier for them if we just walk away, because then they don't have to worry about it, and they don't have to worry about how do I care for them and what do I say or what don't I say.
Right.
Because they're not educated, or they're worried. I saw this a lot with my folks. They're worried that, is it catchy? Am I going to get it?
Right.
Or I'm getting of this age, and that spooks them, and so they don't
Right.
want to be around it at all.
Right. David is saying Alzheimer's treatments are not a cure for the disease, as we know. They can help to slow cognitive decline and improve quality of life, but they do not stop the disease from progressing. Are biochemical and cognitive support costly? And are there organizations that can provide financial support? Good question.
So you're exactly right. We don't have a cure. And does it really slow it or not? It's really iffy, because how do you truly measure that?
Correct.
And I'm going to give you an example. My mom back in the day was on Aricept, and it got to the time as she progressed, we were asking, should she still be taking this? Is it helping? And their answer was, and it still is today from many doctors when you ask them that question, is we won't know until we take them off.
Right.
And then if it was helping and we put them back on, chances are they're not going to go to the level that they were right now. So it's, in my estimation and from my personal research, I haven't seen a definitive in that. Just like I don't necessarily agree with the numbers of people they say have the disease, because you and I, Phyllis, know, we talk to these people all the time. There's a lot of people who haven't gotten diagnosed.
Correct.
And then you look at the ripple effect, they'll say, well, each person, it's 5 to 6 people they affect. Well, most people have a bigger family and circle of friends than 5 or 6. So let's get real. And then the businesses. Is there, support for the cost of these medications? For some medications, there will be foundations within the pharmaceutical company where they'll supply them, but you have to apply. I haven't heard anything specific with the dementia drugs, but I know I've seen that with heart and kidney and things like that.
Right.
So that would be something to ask. But a lot of times when they're new, they don't do that. But I mean, it was thousands and thousands of dollars for some of the more recent stuff that was even blocked after it got passed. And people
Right. Remember,
and
I don't remember the name of the medication. Maybe you do. It was like some astronomical amount of money. Do you remember the name of it? It was recent.
I don't. It was within the last few years, though.
Yeah.
And I purposely, I think, block it out because I don't want to misspeak, because I'm not on top of all that stuff. I personally would not take that if there was a chance of me getting having a stroke and throwing a blood clot and, bleeding. And those are the things that aren't talked about as much. It's just, this, and those types of things can happen. And again, it's everyone's choice.
Right.
But I'm kind of an anti-pharma girl, period.
Me too.
and not just dementia, but just
Period. No, me
in all
too.
aspects of my life.
Right.
And that's not everybody. And I'm not
Right.
saying be like me, be who you are, but thoroughly examine, what is out there. I think that's very important to do.
Right. So Terry is saying, are there any studies done with identical twins and the onset of Alzheimer's?
I'm not sure on that one.
Me neither.
I would say Google it, AI it's.
I was going to say, ask AI, ask ChatGPT, or because if it's out there, they will at least be able to say something about it, and then you could look further. And sometimes if you actually ask for citations or research, it will give you the citation so that you could actually go look it up, beyond what it's telling you, which I think, I was saying the other day, I don't remember to whom, but if you even go into a search engine, especially Google, and you put in some information that you're looking for, I don't know if people notice, but the information you get, it says AI overview. This has been happening for a very long time. So it doesn't really matter whether you go into ChatGPT or you do it that way, because really it's AI that's really scrubbing the internet and giving you the information.
Very much so. My guess is that, just if your twin has it, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get it.
Right. I agree. So, I want you to talk a little bit about, Alzheimer Speaks, which has been lauded by Maria Shriver and Oprah, and how that happened. When I first found that out, I was kind of jealous, I have to say. How did that happen? But talk about that a little bit, because that's pretty incredible.
Well, so for those ladies, recognizing Alzheimer Speaks, I mean, that was just like a miracle from God dropped down. I didn't reach out. I didn't do any of that stuff. It just happened. But I think it happened because, my whole passion was to provide services, products, and tools that people could tap into for free, that could change their lives and help them live graciously alongside this disease. For me as a daughter, I was frustrated with the statistics and the PET scans. They didn't help me at home at all deal with any of the symptoms we were dealing with. And so, okay, I have the diagnosis. I got that. Now what do we do on a daily, minute by minute basis? And so to me, that was really critical. And I wanted to take the fear out of it. And so if you visit alzheimerspeaks.com, we have one whole section that is just free educational resources. And there, I have a radio show like Phyllis does. People can hear that, or podcast. You can listen to video interviews that I just facilitate, really, called Dementia Chats, and you will hear from people living with dementia. To me, there's nothing better than actually hearing from the people affected versus us kind of peeking in the window, trying to figure out what's going on in the house. Let's just ask.
I agree.
They have brilliant ideas, and some of them are so simple and, to implement, and they make us look at things in a different way, because they're like, we know you're trying really hard, but that's very upsetting to us. That really isn't helpful to us. This would be those types of conversations. There's Dementia in the Arts, where I partner with Mary Crescenzo, who's a master artist, where we interview people with dementia. And this I found fascinating, Phyllis, is all of them said, when I'm in the zone, my symptoms melt away.
Oh, wow.
I am peaceful. And care partners would say, I got to drag them out to, go to bed or to eat, because they are just so comfortable and so peaceful. And yet we're still fighting the stigma of person with dementia can't learn.
Right.
Oh, don't even try that. They'll never be able to do that.
Right.
That's not true.
Correct.
That is not true. They can participate. We might have to teach them in different ways, but there's no wrong in art.
Right.
And you know, I always said for like my mom, she got to a point where her ego left the building. So she
Right.
didn't care anymore. If someone
Right.
was like looking over her shoulder and judging her, she just didn't really care. And
Right.
I think some people with dementia get to that point, like, that is really small of you to do that. And if that's what you need to do, go for it. But
Right.
I'm not living my life like that anymore.
It's interesting that you say, because of course I've heard this working in long-term care and skilled nursing, oh, they, first of all, I can't stand they, but whatever, as an adjective to describe, because to me, it just lumps people together and each person is an individual. But just talking about it, well, they can't learn anything. And, was pointed out to me a gazillion years ago. um, how untrue that is, because some of it is learned rote behavior, learned by routine. But when you see people in a long-term care environment, and they learn who sits where. They learn when they go to the dining room that they want to sit in this at this table with this person, that this is their friend. um, you know they they're still a living being with desires and interests. And I don't think people see that. I don't think they really see that. And that's what some of the things that I find disturbing, actually.
Yeah, that's one of my big kicks right now is teaching sensory care. And what does that really mean? And it's really about figuring out what irritates, frustrates, or triggers, what we call behaviors. And even like our word choices, like don't say behaviors anymore.
Right.
It's a
That's,
reaction.
I
We need to look at it as a clue. We're the ones that can fix this. And so much of this stuff is very simple. It can be noise that triggers.
correct.
It
Or
can lighting. It could be, I mean, the list goes on and on. It could be certain people. It could be settings. It could be time of day. It
it
could
was
be
cold or hot. It could be so many things. It could be that a person doesn't feel well and they can't express it. I have used this example for many, many years. If you think of yourself, and you have an itch in the middle of your back and you can't reach it, and you wouldn't have any way to explain to somebody what you were experiencing, what you were feeling, how would you behave? And if somebody looked at you and saw you trying to run up to a doorway and rub yourself against the doorway to try and resolve it for yourself, or whatever you were trying to do, people would look at you and say, what's wrong with this person? But think about that person who can't express what they're experiencing, even physically. So like you say, I can't stand that term either, dementia behavior. I can't stand it, actually.
Yeah, it's just a reaction, and we also have to look at ourselves,
Right.
because a lot of times we are bringing in an atmosphere that's disruptive to them. And so you have to be older like me and remember, like the Stepford wives. Everybody has a smile on their face no matter
Right.
what was going on in their house. I mean,
Right.
everything would be ready to blow, but they got a smile on their face and a basket to the new person moving in the neighborhood because
Right.
everything's peachy. A person with dementia can still pick up on all our multi-sensory communications. So they're looking at, our eyes, they're looking at our arms, they're listening for the the
Right.
roll of eyes, all of those things they are still able to read. And one of the things that I learned through the Dementia Chats conversations was, we're always told when we communicate with a person with dementia, make sure that we're looking at them, eye level. But what a person with dementia says is, I need to see your face.
Right.
It helps me understand your words because I didn't know that I read lips. But all that you are giving out, which, over 75% of our communication is nonverbal,
Correct.
helps me understand what you need and want from me, or what direction you want me to go, or what
Right.
you want me to
Right.
do. And so it's really bringing us, to me, I see dementia really as a gift to the world to bring us back to some basics. that we have blown past. Instead now we're up with our phones and we're thumbing it,
Right.
texting somebody. People don't know how to interact, and have a conversation or give eye contact. You hear that all the time now.
Right. I
People,
agree.
there's a huge communication breakdown, but our communication is much, much more than just words.
Bring up Maya Angelou's quote that says, people may not remember what you say, but they will always remember how you make them feel. And so I always use the example that not that the person with dementia is a child, because people tend to think that, but I use this example. If you have a child, right, or an infant even, what do they respond to? Just like you say, tone of voice, your facial expression, your physical touch, whether it's warm, whether, you're smiling, whether your voice is tender. So, and a child can understand, even if you don't, even a dog, let's say, understands when you're yelling at the dog as opposed to not yelling at the dog. So what makes people think that a person with dementia who maybe has lost their words to express themselves or lost the ability to understand the other person's words isn't picking up on all of these other signals, but people aren't even thinking about that?
Which amazes me, because I think most people have been taught, for example, that if a person is in a coma,
they can't hear you.
Most people know nowadays that they can hear you.
Well, okay.
And they are taking that all up. And, I have an example of that was just really life-changing for me. My uncle came to me in a dream. And I was so excited when I woke up because I hadn't seen my Uncle Chuck forever. And then I realized, oh my gosh, Uncle Chuck's been dead for like 9 years. But it was like he was at the end of my bed and his arms were out and he had this huge smile and his eyes were just these crystal blue. Oh, they were just gorgeous. And he said to me, tell Kay it's time. We're here.
Wow.
Tell Kay it's time. And I laid in bed not knowing what to do with that. And my auntie was in the hospital in hospice. So I got dressed. I went down to the hospital. And as I'm walking in the door, the nurse grabs me and says, honey, I just want you to know, you say whatever you have to say, because she's not going to respond. She's not going to talk. Her eyes aren't going to open. She's not going to hold your hand. None of that stuff's probably going to happen. But you go in there and say whatever you have to say, because she will know. She will take it all in. So I go in there, and my aunt was really religious, and I thought, oh, she might think this is kind of juju-y, So I talked for 45 minutes about everybody and everything. And then finally I said, okay, Anna Kay, I'm going to tell you why I'm really here. And I explained about my uncle and how he looked and while he was there. And as I'm holding her hand, she squeezed my hand.
Oh my God.
Her eyes popped open. She got this huge smile on her face and she's looking up at the ceiling. The room got cold and it only lasted maybe 5 seconds. And then she squeezed my hand and closed my eyes, but her smile remained on her face. And I stayed with her another 20, 40 minutes. And then I went home, and about 2 hours later, I got the call. She had passed. And I thought, she heard me.
Yeah, absolutely. I have the chills. I'm getting choked up. Yeah, no, but absolutely. Yeah, that was, and that gave her the freedom, actually. She basked in that feeling, and then it gave her the freedom to let go, which, people know about that, I think, nowadays more than anything.
But even like with a baby in a womb, there have been studies where they recognize voice, they recognize music. Why would we think a person outside a womb couldn't do that?
Correct.
So we just have to have more of these conversations, and then we have to teach people to look for different responses. So it might not be a big thing. It might be a little smirk on their face, or a glint in their eye, or a real soft little chuckle. But I'm going to tell you, for me, those things outweigh any of the big stuff. I mean, they're embedded so deeply in my heart and touch me and move me in ways I didn't think were even possible. They're really pretty magnificent. And I have a video, for example, on my YouTube channel of my mom singing with a guitarist and singer. And they were going to film her for an hour. She only lasted a half an hour. But we got all these little clips of her. And, she'd fall asleep and then she'd wake up and her toes would start going and her hands would start going and they would just shake like this.
Right.
And she would just get this huge smile on her face, even though her teeth were all chipped and broken. She was so happy. Sometimes she could get the words out. Sometimes she couldn't. I can tell you, I can have one of the worst days of my life. I go watch one of those. My heart melts and life's good.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It really is beautiful. And, I wish, more people could see it that way. I mean, you and I both know, especially me working all these thousands and thousands of hours in these long-term care environments, how many people don't get visitors, how many people who have visitors and they don't understand them. And like you say, people are uncomfortable. They don't know what to do, what to say. And there are so many things. And probably let's talk about your Dementia Map site, because if people are looking for things to do or suggestions, that might be a good resource for them to be able to find, suggestions for them during visits, or if the person's at home. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So Dementia Map, one of the things that a lot of people don't know is there's a lot of resource directories. There's state and city, there's profit and nonprofit, there's all kinds of things that are out there. But there's nothing that really combines them all together. And what I wanted to do was to bring people at all levels all around the world together. And we're just growing it slowly. I'm not buying lists. I refuse to do that. I truly believe this is a collaborative effort. I want people that are actually going to respond to your needs when you reach out, because we all hear that all the time. Well, I left a message, I emailed, I text, still no one's gotten back to me. I want people who are going to respond, and I want a variety of people. So we have about 150 categories people can search. We'd love to see it grow. So if you're one of those people, you can grab a free listing in there easily, or we have paid ones. But it's totally free to public and professionals to search. We want it to be simple. We want to get you connected to them specifically. So if you even go into our activities section, you'll find all different types of ways, from reminiscing and music therapy and art. And, the list just kind of goes on and on that you can tap into. So much doesn't have to be in your own backyard anymore. And I think families realize that much more than businesses do. Businesses are starting to get it, but I still think they have a long ways to go in terms of who is their target market. And part of that gets tied into their grant funding, because their grant funding said, well, we're going to serve this county or whatever it might be. And, people could be over in Europe and helping you.
Correct.
And so much of this stuff is online and it's free to do. There's, support groups. I mean, it's unlimited. And so we want to keep growing that for you and listen to you. If you want a tour of actually how to do the searches, we've got multiple ways to be able to do that. I'm more than glad to meet with you. We also have some great articles. We have a glossary of terms. We have a calendar of events, which I got to say is kind of slim right now. And part of that has to do with just, I think healthcare is really stretched right now.
Oh.
And we don't have enough staff to do a thorough job. I don't think anybody does, if they're honest.
I agree. So how would somebody find the site? And if you also want to give any of your contact information
Sure.
At this point, because before we end, I do want to talk about the Dementia Cafe and what that is and how that was founded and what it means and all of that. But how would they get to Dementia Map?
So Dementia Map is just dementiamap.com, same like alzheimersspeaks.com. You'll find lots of free stuff on both of those. And then, my email is just Lori, Lori, at alzheimersspeaks.com is the best way to reach out to me. But on either site, there's contact buttons that you can, reach out to me from there as well. We're on all different, platforms from Facebook and LinkedIn, and it'll always be Twitter, even though it's X.
And we won't talk about that, but okay, we'll press that.
So pretty easy to find, and I love talking with families. If a person's diagnosed, if it's someone caring for them, as well as businesses, big and small. I don't think that we can make sustainable change if we're not inclusive of everyone, because everyone is a part of that change movement.
I agree. So now going from that, and you want to talk about this, Dementia Cafe, what that is, what it means, how you came about developing it, and how is that different, or what makes it a Dementia Cafe?
Okay. Well, first it's called a memory cafe.
Oh, sorry, memory cafe. Sorry.
But some people call them, there's Alzheimer's cafes, there's dementia cafes, there's deaf cafes, there's all kinds of different things out there. So it does get confusing. What I love about them, and I heard about this through Facebook, through Norms McNamara, who's been living with dementia forever over in the UK, is it was a very different concept from what we saw here in the US. It was where people living with dementia and their care partners could go to a group together. And here in the US, for many, many years, we didn't have anything for the person diagnosed.
Correct.
We just had something for the caregivers. And a lot of those meetings, and some people will argue with me on this, but I've heard it from too many people, people would go to complain. They would go to vent. And I didn't want that. I wanted people to feel comfortable, to be honest, on what's going on in their life. But I also wanted them to feel comfortable to talk about those issues with their loved one right there, because they have input.
Right.
And they have great suggestions. And you know what? We're not all so perfect. We tick them off just as much as they tick us off sometimes.
Absolutely.
And so, we got to get past that and get into the real world. So over in the UK, a lot of them are in Baptist basements, and they will get together and they'll typically have some food, and they'll do something fun like music. And then some of them break off, so they each have their own group. When I brought the first one over here, it was kind of between me, I'm in Minnesota, and another group in Wisconsin. There were a couple of different ways to do it. So initially we were going to do some education because nobody knew what the heck they were. Right. And we wanted to shift kind of that dementia care from crisis to comfort. So we started doing education and then conversation. And what we found from the people that attended was, one, they were willing to drive a long ways. People were driving an hour to get to us one way. And our advertising, our paper on the St. Paul side wouldn't even do anything for a year. Minneapolis did. So we had all these people driving to get to us. And then St. Paul side did it, and we expanded. We ended up having 3 different groups, and we started helping others develop groups closer to their home. So to me, it's not about ownership, and it's really about listening to your group, because your group, Phyllis, might need something different than my group.
Right.
And that's okay. It's about meeting their needs, And so we ended up switching from having it be educational in the beginning to strictly being conversational. And the rationale was, Lori, we know that a lot of senior communities put on educational programs. Can you just tell us where those are? You don't need to duplicate them.
Oh, wow.
Brilliant.
Yeah, right.
Brilliant. And they said, and we really miss our friends and family who have walked away from us. So we really appreciate having a new peer group that understands what we're dealing with. and they laugh and they cry together. They go out to lunch and dinner and have walks. They'll communicate at 3 a.m. sometimes with one another if they're struggling. They bring in resources, but the bonds are so strong so quickly because they're not understood. And
Right.
anyone here dealing with dementia typically has struggled with even family members coming over going, they seem fine to me.
Right.
And you're going, they're not fine. They're having a good moment right now, but
Right.
stay more than 20 minutes.
Right.
And it will become evident. But no, they're like, see ya.
Oh, so it's interesting you say that, because I think, when we talk about, what people expect, or, what they see, that's very often the case. They look at it as a moment in time, and you can't look either way. You can't look at it as a moment in time, they're fine now, and you can't look at it at a moment in time, oh my God, they forgot they can't remember this, that, or the other thing, and then apply that more universally to their entire experience. And I think it's so important for people to hear that and remember that this is not a snapshot.
Exactly. And one of the things, like when I started my memory cafe, I was told by other organizations, well, you're going to have to test them and you're going to have to see what stage they're in. I'm like, I'm not doing that. And they're like, well, you have to. And I said, no, I don't. And no, I won't. Right. I said, because I know if somebody did that to my mom, you might catch her at a bad moment. Right. And they were like, well, you can't have somebody who can't talk. Well, why not? Right. Well, they can't participate. Yeah, they can in their own way. Everybody, we had one man who had a stroke, and he used to be a deacon in his church. He was hilarious. He mimed everything, and he over-exaggerated, and he just cracked us up constantly. But he was following everything. We had another woman with early onset who struggled even to say her name. But when she did, everybody clapped. We had some people who weren't comfortable speaking. And like one woman, she was so cute. She'd grab her husband's arm. This happened pretty much every single time. And she'd say, and John's the speaker of our house, and then he would pick up and go from there. So we meet people where we're at. We always would try to ask the person with dementia for their contribution first, and then default to the care partner.
I think that's so crucial, because so many times, as you and I know, and it doesn't even have to be a person who has dementia or any kind of cognitive impairment, that there's a tendency to think that that person doesn't know anything, can't make a decision, can't speak for themselves. And I mean, you and I, I'm sure, have seen this over and over and over again. And it's so dehumanizing, right? And marginalizing. And, if you talk to the person without the family member or friend or whoever it is that speaks, they'll tell you, I could have answered that. I don't know why they said that. And then if the person does speak up, then there's very often an argument ensues, because the person, the older person or the person living with whatever it is telling the other person to be quiet, right? That they want to speak for themselves, and it goes back and forth. And I don't think people realize how dehumanizing that is.
Well, and you think, just because it happens to all of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where someone runs us up and then we pull back. And then we don't participate, or we leave the conversation altogether. And now all of a sudden we are categorized as being non-social or having a behavioral issue. And it's you were rude to me, so I don't want to be around that.
Correct.
You were exclusive of me.
When we talk about environmental factors, right? And about looking a person in the eye, right? Face to face. I talk about a dance teacher I had that developed a program. It's called Roll Call for people in wheelchairs. And it's face to face, hand to hand, heart to heart, which is really, I've adopted that, right? I told him I would adopt it. He said, go ahead. Because there's one commercial that I see. And every time I haven't seen it in a while, but every time I would see it, it irritated me. And it was a commercial about a woman who with these behaviors, and the woman was becoming aggressive or whatever, argumentative and reactionary. And every time I see the commercial, I say, but here's the thing. Here's this daughter came along putting a sweater on her mother from behind. Does she know if her mother wanted a sweater? Did she tell her mother she was coming? Did the mother recognize who this was? Did she startle her mother? I mean, as a professional in this space, and you also probably can see all of that, but just for the mere commercial part of it and for advertising the medication, right, which was what it was for, people don't see all of that, right? They just see what the commercial is trying to portray. That.
And I know exactly what you're talking about because it ticks me off every single time I see it too. And it's just like, that's not right. That's not an accurate depiction of what's going on. Can I share a quick story?
Please.
Breaks that down. So it's called As the Cookie Crumbles. So at this time, my mom was living in a nursing home and they were having this big, huge picnic. So my daughter and I went to go get her, and my daughter's out on the patio with my mom. There's like 100 people. The grills are going, the music's playing. There's food all over, and I'm helping getting other people out in their wheelchairs. And every time I would lock somebody in, I'd look over, and my mom and my daughter are just having a good time, and they're laughing. I go back in. The last time I'm locking somebody in, I look up and my mom is screaming at the top of her lungs at my daughter. Leave me alone. I hate you. Leave me alone. Now my daughter is 18. She's only known her grandma with dementia.
Right.
She comes running over, her lips quivering. She's got just, these tears streaming down her face. I give her a big hug and she goes, she hates me. She hates me. I said, I know she doesn't hate you. And she goes, no, listen to her. She said it in front of everyone. She's still screaming. Look at how mad she is, Mom. I said, honey, we got to break down what happened. She's like, Mom, I don't know what you're talking about. I said, well, what were you doing with Grandma? She said, well, we were just talking and laughing. I said, okay, you were talking and laughing. What else were you doing? Mom, we were just talking and laughing. I said, no, I saw you. You were holding hands with Grandma too, weren't you? Well, yeah. I said, so you're talking and laughing. You're holding hands with Grandma. Did you have eye contact? Well, of course I had eye contact with Grandma. I said, so you're talking and laughing. You're holding hands. You had eye contact. What happened that Grandma's screaming at you? And she said, well, they came around with cookies. And she was eating the cookie. A chunk fell on her chest. And she said, Mom, I just picked it up. That's all I did.
Oh, gosh.
I said, honey, what made you decide to pick up the cookie? She goes, Mom, I don't know where you're going. And I said, were you still talking and laughing? And she had to think a minute. She said, because we take all this stuff for granted.
Correct.
She said, well, no, we had a break in the conversation. I said, okay, so when you went to get the cookie, were you still holding Grandma's hand? Well, no, I was sitting next to her and I was holding her hand, but I had to stand up. And so I let go of her hand. I said, did you still have eye contact? She said, no, I had to look at her chest to get the cookie. I said, honey, you lost 3 huge connections with Grandma. Right. And in that nanosecond, she lost her connection with you. And you reached in and you touched her in an inappropriate spot for a stranger.
Right.
Grandma has learned this all her life, stranger danger.
Right.
And I said, that's why she reacted. We have to teach people the importance of that multisensory communication. It's absolutely critical because typically their reaction makes a lot of sense when we put ourselves into the equation and what we missed.
Correct. So Renee says, I don't know how you know what you think are communication. You don't know why an Alzheimer's patient smiles or grabs an arm. The affect behind the physical representation cannot be known by the observer. True. So you are creating the meaning for your own needs and attributing this to the Alzheimer's patient's intentionality. It's a good point. It's a very, very good point, because obviously we're only interpreting through our own eyes. And we are ascribing meaning to that and trying to make sense of it, rather than pointing the finger in an accusing, I think that's the whole idea. We're trying not to point the finger at the person in an accusatory way. So we're trying to interpret it through a different lens so as not to think of them in this accusatory, and I'll often say, demeaning or derogatory way. What do you think of that?
No, I agree. We'll never know, but we can use our emotional intelligence to do our best guess with that and then keep those things in play and see if we still get the same types of reaction. That will give us a very good cue as to what's what. When someone smiles at you, they may be thinking you look like somebody from their childhood, somebody that they loved. They might grab you really hard, like, get the heck away from me, or you're going to harm the person next to me. We have to be able to interpret some of those things. What leads me in terms of interpreting what's going on and how I can best care for them on a sensory level, because again, I do think it gets back to how we make somebody feel, is do they feel safe, happy, and pain-free? To me, those are the three primary things that I have to focus on. And if I can get them in that zone, a lot of this other stuff that might be irritant to me or somebody else or to them is going to melt away. So being observant, not being afraid to try, it's not a right or a wrong thing. It's what's going to make them most comfortable. I'll give you another example. Harry Urban was working in his office, and he was getting really paranoid. Now, he lives with dementia. And he ended up calling his wife in because he's like, somebody's in my office. I feel it. It's there. And then he turns and he doesn't see anybody. Phyllis stands back and she's observing this and seeing his frustration build. And what she realizes was the blinds were open. And when the clouds covered the sun, the room got darker. And that's when he felt the shadow of somebody behind him. So all she had to do was shut the blinds. Simple little things. Again, we don't know for sure, but it worked.
Right. So it's a trial and error. And I would go back to my example about a child, because, how many times have, if anybody is viewing or listening that has had children or has somebody in their family with children or been around children, and, a child is crying and throwing themselves on the floor, whatever it is, right? Or whining. And what do? It's process of elimination. Are they tired? Are they hungry? Do they want something to drink? Or do they need to be changed? Are they wet? It's really the same kind of thing. It's a process of elimination and determining, getting to the point where you think you found the thing that is causing that.
And it's not about manipulating them.
Correct.
You're really trying to influence the environment for their comfort.
Right.
And there's a big difference between manipulating someone for your own needs. And granted, it feels good when you think you have it figured out. But if you deal with dementia, what works today might not work tomorrow. It might not work 5 minutes from now, but it might work 2 weeks later.
Right.
That's just kind of the disease.
Yeah.
But again, to me, the goal is about keeping them in a safe, comfortable zone. And our environment, our actions are just critical, because even if you evaluate yourself, what makes you feel edgy? Sometimes that one person can just walk into a meeting and you're like, oh, it's all turned right now. Everybody in the room knows this person, and it's there. No one says anything, but the dynamics change.
Right.
So what are those dynamics for that person that can't communicate with us? And if they can, ask.
Right.
Don't take that away from them, but be their partner in creating that safe, comfortable environment where they feel they can participate and be respected.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to say it, to be their partner. So wait, and there's one more comment here before we end. Renee says, our emotional intelligence Our emotional intelligence is not the patient's. At best, there is an observation, but isn't even a correlation. This is my problem. We want to understand the Alzheimer's patient responses based on our own memories and meanings and not theirs. We have to get beyond us when we are saddled with the unenviable task to make sense of nonsense.
I guess I would disagree with that a little bit, because the only thing any of us has is our own basis.
Correct.
Alzheimer's or not. And to me, that's how we interact with life, every day and with every person, because you're never really going to know what's in that other person's mind. So the best we can do is guess and try.
Yeah, I agree. Well, Lori, this has just been terrific. So thanks so much for sharing your time and your continued advocacy and work for Alzheimer's disease, both living with it and their families and friends it's inspirational to me, I have to say. So I hope the listeners and viewers learn valuable information, not only about the disease, but also about the possibilities, because I think there are tremendous possibilities that people can think about, but aren't always aware of. So thanks so much.
Thank you. And, and I love that Renee asked those questions, because,
me too.
Question us all. Nobody has the answers for this. And so the more we all dig, the more we all have an opportunity to hear other people's, thoughts in this, the better off I think we'll all be.
I agree. 100%. Yeah.
So thanks again, Phyllis.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Lori. We'll talk soon. So now I'd like to turn to next week's guest on Senior Nation. Leanne Clark Shirley, who holds a PhD in gerontology, is president and CEO of the American Society of Aging. Leanne is a social gerontologist who is dedicated to building a society in which all of us have a full and long life. She brings 20 plus years of experience working in aging-related nonprofit consulting and academic environments. Prior to joining the American Society of Aging, she served as AARP's Senior Evaluation Advisor. And prior to that, she led the Aging and Disability Research practice at Impact International, a think tank and policy research firm. And I must add that today, I believe, is Ageism Awareness Day. So I'm so thrilled that Leanne will be able to join us next week. So remember to tune in, comment, and ask questions on Wednesday, October 15th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on the Source TV Radio Network. And until then, take care, stay well, and stay tuned.
Go for it. I'm just saying I'm not finished yet. Search for it, swing for it. Discover the me that lives in yes. Stand for it, stretch for it. It's my time, imagine my best. Run for it, reach for it. Uncover the me that lives in yes. I know, yes I know. There'll be miracles wherever I go. It's not work, it's play. I can make